Latch the windows, lock the doors, and put the kids to bed. It's time for another episode of
Tales from the Garage.
Okay, so here I go. Man, I'm back in the garage. It's been a long time. I do an explanation of what's been going on and why I haven't recorded in a while. Quite a few things have gone on, and I'll discuss it, but I think it would make the video too longer. And I want to really do my annual Halloween video. Halloween is the only time of year that I love. To me, it's the only holiday. Christmas was a family thing, but once my mom died, Christmas was just nothing. Was just trying to get in the spirit. A lot of, more than getting into it, actually. So, Halloween, which was always my favorite quote-unquote holiday. Too bad it wasn't a day off of school. I just like the vibe of it and everything since I was a kid. And I'm actually a fan of the weather. I am not a summertime heat fan, so that when autumn comes in every year, I'm just thrilled by it. And so, the temperatures are the way I like it. I like the leaves coming off of the trees and the way the bare trees look. I love the Halloween autumn vibe and all the monster movies that come on TV and everything. And I always have, and I always will. So this year for my Halloween video, it's been a long time since I did a video, and like I said, I think any explanation would take too long and would require somebody to call in sick for work. So I'll probably do, if this video comes out, because again, I'm out in the garage with this computer that sometimes records and sometimes chooses not to. Or rather, when I press the stop record button after making a video, for some reason it decides to delete the file. So I have to do the whole thing over again. I'm hoping that's not going to happen this time because I'm kind of already out of practice as it is. So it's been quite a while since I've done any video, and I've done a video out here in my beloved garage, which I can tell you definitely needs a good sweep out. I haven't been very good attending to that. So it's got like a lot of cobwebs and some spider webs and stuff like that. And it's kind of fitting. Actually, right now it's raining outside, and it's very dark, perfect stormy weather. And it's quite cool in here. So I'm very much catching the Halloween vibe in here as well. So what I thought I would show, if you've watched my past videos, my Halloween videos in the past 2 or 3 years that I did them, literally everything I'm going to show was in those. But people aren't going to go back, probably, and watch those. And, this is more like kind of an update, like, yes, I'm still listening to this stuff, folks, believe it or not. You can kind of count on it, when this time of year comes around. And for me, I get so depressed once November 1st comes along that I kind of just extend the holiday. So for me, Halloween lasts well into November. Well into November, if not all the way at least to the end of November. So today I brought out the stuff that I've shown in the past years, though I think I did in the past forget bunches of it on different years. So probably not all of these things were ever shown together in one video. And I've got it kind of broken down by the type of recording it is. Now, the one thing that there's no shortage of on CD or even back in LP and cassette days are sound effects records. I only have a couple of those because, honestly, I don't play them a whole lot. I have them loaded into my computer, my main computer, which is where I pretty much listen to 99% of my music from anyway. But I always thought they were more for kind of playing at the door when trick-or-treaters come by. But, with all the Halloween-related things that I do have, I guess I just picked up a couple things through the course of the years. And one of them was I didn't even know that it was just a sound effects record. This thing called A Night in the Haunted House, A Night in the Graveyard. I wasn't sure what that was. I was hoping it was going to be stories, which it isn't. It's sound effects. And this one with the very cool cover, Demonic Soundscapes. These are all just sound effects records. And honestly, they're lucky if they get played once a year. You know, it's more like the kind of thing that you would play at a party at a background. But then we get into other types of Halloween music, I guess you'd call it. And this is probably, I'm going to start off with probably one of my top 5. Everybody hates this album, though. But, you know, I have like a top 5 Halloween or top 10 Halloween. This is definitely in it. And it's just remakes of movie themes called Halloween Horror Movie Themes by a company called Drew's. Now, Drew's, named, I guess, after Drew, the guy that probably started it, is known for being one of these things that makes compilations, mostly of top 40 pop songs. I don't know how much they do it now, but certainly in the 80s they were very active, and they would do things, a lot of compilations, pop songs like Hall & Oates and Michael Jackson and stuff like that. They did covers. So it was kind of like those old K-Tel records from the 60s and 70s. So what they did here is some guy with a synthesizer remade all these themes. Now, a lot of people don't like these because they're not the originals. Like there's a 4.5 minute version of Tubular Bells, for instance, on here, and a lot of movie themes, and things that were played by, say, orchestras or a lot of acoustic instruments that are done electronically here. And it sounds like mostly by, a guy with a bunch of synthesizers. But I look at it as different synthesizer renditions of these pieces, and I enjoyed them a lot. And the Halloween, there was a Halloween on Music Choice, which is a cable television radio company that if you have cable TV, you probably have 10 or 12 or 15 or 20 cable channels way up at the end of the cable. Like for me, they were in my 800s. 800 channel numbers, and they played just different types of music. One was a classical station, one was pop, jazz, heavy metal, everything. They had a Sound of the Seasons channel, and every year at Halloween time, they would pull out quite a selection of Halloween things, and a lot of songs like you would expect, Michael Jackson's Thriller and that kind of stuff, and old pop songs like the Purple People Eater, stuff like that. But they also played some soundtracks, some stuff off of John Carpenter soundtracks. But for some reason, for all the years that I saw it, they loved this album, and they played most of the tracks from this album for whatever reason. And I think this is out of print now. And a lot of every review I've read of it, people don't like it because it's synthesizer renditions, but of these tracks, and a lot of them were formerly orchestral tracks. But you know what? I dig it, and it's one of my top 10. And one of the reasons why is because that music channel, that Sounds of the Seasons music channel, played it so much. And the Drew's Company did a lot of compilation CDs. And a lot of them have the same tracks on them of various movie themes and things like that. So here's another one that he did of Halloween themes. Now, I avoided, but they also have like Halloween pop songs, like their remake of Michael Jackson's Thriller. Those I avoided. I was going more for the instrumental music. This isn't Drew's. This is a different company. But I think it's it's a different company, but it's the same concept. It's a bunch of people, mostly electronic musicians, getting together and doing a mixture, in this case, of old movie themes and another different version of Tubular Bells and music from Pet Sematary and things like that. But in this one, which I'm not crazy about, they mix in some sound effects tracks. So you have a music track and a sound effects track, one called like Chainsaw Massacre and somebody screaming and things like that. So I'm less in love with that, but I was interested in the remakes of the music tracks. So here's another, going back to Drew's, another thing, Fright Flicks. So that, once again, another kind of compilation of their re-recorded versions of things like the Jaws theme and the theme from Friday the 13th and the X-Files theme, the same Tubular Bells version that appeared on the other CD, Scream, Scream and the Amityville Horror, the movie themes, stuff like that. Halloween, the remake of that John Carpenter's theme. Here's one that came out just a couple years ago, and I don't know that Drews is doing these anymore, that I really liked. Even though, once again, this one ends with a bunch of sound effects, but the main body of the CD is a little bit different, classical Halloween music. Some of it sounds like an orchestra, and then some of it is most definitely done on synthesizers. But these are straight, just excerpts from classical pieces, and a lot of classical pieces like Dance Macabre and the Funeral March of the Marionette, which was the theme from the Alfred Hitchcock Presents TV show, and things like that. Night on Bald Mountain, Toccata and Fugue in D minor. So a lot of old classical works that were very much used very frequently in movies. The 2001 Space Odyssey theme is on here. This one I particularly like, even though, once again, they're remakes and in some cases synthesizer renditions. And here's another one. This one not by the Drews Company, but the same thing. Very scary music. Once again, remakes of the theme from the X-Files and Nightmare on Elm Street, and the theme from Jaws, and Nightmare Before Christmas, which is a movie I've never seen actually. Friday the 13th, the Psycho Suite, which is Psycho Suite from the 1960 movie Psycho, was always a very big one for them to cover. And here's another one. I forget what company is this. Madison, which is mostly a video company, had this weird package of one DVD and one CD. The DVD is the original Night of the Living Dead, which everybody and anybody releases because it's in the public domain, so it doesn't cost them anything to put it out. But the other one is a CD, and I think this one actually used an orchestra, but I don't recall offhand. Once again, of movie themes. The whole suite of music from the original Psycho they do, and The Shining, and Friday the 13th, and Hellraiser themes, and the Omen themes, and once again Jaws, and another version of the Halloween theme from the original Halloween. That one's interesting. And of course, I think they did two. I think Mannheim Steamroller has done 2 Halloween CDs, and this was the first. And this is their own versions, their own recordings and renditions of mostly, I would say, their versions, which are very interesting, of classical pieces associated with Halloween. Once again, Night on Bald Mountain, Hall of the Mountain King, The Sorcerer's Apprentice, The Flying Dutchman, things like that. Very interesting because those versions are different and done in their own style. Now here's a particular favorite. I came across this totally accidentally and didn't know that it existed, but man, is this really good. This is one of the top ones. It's called Music from Castle Dracula. There's no music on here that you would have heard of before. It's apparently original. I don't know if it's original music or music that was written specifically for this album. Supposedly, now they claim this was actually recorded in, was it Romania, in the castle of the real historical Dracula that the fictional character was based on. But it's about 40 minutes of really interesting music played by this very interesting, kind of like an early music ensemble of... you can hear like tambourines and stringed instruments. I'm not sure what the stringed instruments are, and I think they may be actually using period piece authentic stringed instruments, like Hungarian stringed instruments or something. It's very interesting music. I'm trying to remember now. Do they have readings in here? It was all mixed in New York, but they claim that it was actually produced and recorded in the real Dracula's castle. Who knows if it's true? A lot of reverb on here, but this is a really, really good. There's nothing like it because the music is totally unique and original, very atmospheric. There's not a lot of information in here, and I can't remember offhand because I haven't played it yet this year. This is going to probably end up getting played tonight. I can't recall. I think there's the occasional reading of a few lines from the actual original novel of Dracula. Again, I found this online, and I think it's getting increasingly hard to find. Well, it's on some Terrascape Records. It's from the late 90s, 96. Though the record label has an address of New York. This is really a cool album. Very, very original. That's definitely a top thing for me. So where do I go next? Well, here's another top. This might be my number one Halloween CD, period. Going into another area now. And that is stories, ghost stories or old radio broadcasts of Halloween type or ghost stories or whatever that I always pull out and listen to this time of year. This one is my particular favorite, Ghost Gallery, which is just a whole bunch of short 4 or 5 minute stories. Most of these are original stories or based on things you've seen or heard before, done by this wonderful guy, Tom Willett, who was an actor. I think he's retired now, living in Tennessee. Nice guy, but he's still active, but not actively acting anymore. But he's a musician, so he's got a very big, very popular YouTube channel, Tom Willett, and I forget what it's called offhand now, what the name of his channel is, but he's very popular. He'll play music. He does everything from stock market picks to original songs that he plays at his home on his piano. And back in the mid-90s, somebody asked him from the record company to record a Halloween CD, so he did a whole bunch of ghost stories, more than a dozen stories on here. And he narrates the stories and just tells the stories, but he also did the music soundtrack all on synthesizer. You can tell it's very minimal music, but it works, and it's really fun. It's the most fun CD that I have for the Halloween season. It's probably my number one Halloween CD, the one that I certainly associate the most with the holiday. And others that it's not maybe so much of a Halloween CD, but I always play it this time of year, I guess because the subject matter is UFO Crash at Roswell, which is just a real, honest-to-goodness documentary, or an audio documentary on CD, all about the original UFO crash at Roswell. Very interesting. It's over an hour long, and I guess because of the subject matter, it always gets played this time of year. This was just a blind buy, Tales of Terror, maybe a bit more on the slightly, maybe this one isn't so silly, but it's supposedly true tales of ghosts and things like that happened in Charleston area. It's supposedly just based in that area, and this was done by a guy that does guided tours of that area. So I guess this was a real specific regional thing, and he probably sold these CDs as part of the tour that he would give in the Charleston area. But also put it up on the internet, and I couldn't avoid buying it. I couldn't prevent myself from buying it. And there's just a bunch of lighter-hearted readings of well-known ghost stories like Tales from the Tomb. Well, this one actually may be like originals stories on this particular one. Though they do a couple things like Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. They read that poem, but most of these stories are things that they kind of made up for this rather. It's fun. It's lighthearted tales from the tomb, the kind of thing. Turn the lights off and listen to type of thing. And I've got this Halloween's Greatest Stories. These are mostly Edgar Allan Poe stories mixed in with a couple originals. And this next one is actually just a reissue of the same album. I didn't realize that at the time. Tales from Beyond, and they just took all of the Edgar Allan Poe stories and reproduced that CD, but at the end threw on some scary sound effects. Still, it's a lot of fun. Then we get to more serious type of reading of ghost stories. There's, I think, 4 volumes, and they have 3 of them, of this thing called Classic Chilling Tales. I think there's 4 volumes, and each one is a 2 CD set that's pretty much crammed to nearly 80 minutes of these are not original ghost stories. These are very famous things, Edgar Allan Poe, Rudyard Kipling, Guy de Montfort, the Horla, which was a movie at one point. I know, O. Henry, some very well-known actual long-form stories, that were in print that go back quite a number of years. Serious stories, and all of them. I think this must be a British company that sanctioned these because they're all read by British actors, mostly people I don't know, but they're stage actors. So here's volume 2, which continues the trend, read by another UK stage actor. So it's basically classic literature. It's not quote unquote like Halloween stuff so much. Ambrose Bierce and Charles Dickens and Oscar Wilde, M.R. James and Edgar Allan Poe. So it's real, serious readings of novels. And all of the series has 2 CDs crammed pretty much as close as they could get to a full 80 minutes. And here's volume 3, and I'm missing volume 4. I don't have volume 4. But again, they have actors reading, British, pretty much stage actors reading these stories. And Ambrose Bierce and just some fairly well-known stories written a long, long time ago. And this is, did I say this is the Naxos company, the NAXOS, the guys that do the classical recordings mainly. Moving on to still ghost stories on CD. Got some old radio broadcast, the old Lights Out program that goes back to, when does it go back to? The 40s, if not the 30s. And they've packaged together a lot of episodes of Lights Out. In this case, these are from the early 40s, these couple episodes. There's some of these, I actually forget what's on here. Classic Tales of Horror, but read by fairly well-known people. Juliet Mills, Robert Forster, the actor. And these are Robert Bloch, if you know the author Robert Bloch stories on here, as well as a lot of other authors that I'm not familiar with. But there's 3 CDs in here, and Ray Bradbury stories. So once again, this is a more serious reading of the full-length stories. But all in that mode, that Halloween mode. Here's some more. This is a collection of 3 CDs of old radio broadcasts of the classic. I guess they probably cut them down for radio, but each story is at least a half hour, and each disc has at least 2 stories on it. And it's from the. I want to say it's from the. I guess I could try to pull some of the CDs out. They read. They do a version adapted for radio of Dracula, and this is complete and unedited as it was broadcast. If you can imagine this, from 1938. Now, this one CD that runs about an hour has the entire Dracula story that runs that's about an hour long, as it was broadcast on a CBS station in 1938. If you can imagine. Another one is a couple different versions, read on the radio again, of the original Mary Shelley's Frankenstein novel. One of them was from 1944. Incredible that they kept the tapes of these. And another version of Frankenstein is on here, again a radio broadcast from 1955. If you can imagine that, that's a long time ago. This is back in the days when people still didn't really have TVs. And they broadcast on CBS radio network. And the third CD is The Werewolf from 1944 and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde from 1945. So all of these, I guess, would be stories that are between a half hour and an hour. And I just love that vibe of, these are the original radio broadcasts exactly as they sounded. I can't imagine who had the thought at that time to preserve these and save these broadcasts. At the time, people didn't sell things like this, on record or, tape or anything like that. So it's kind of amazing to me that somebody would have the foresight to save these for the future. And yet they did, so that we can all now enjoy them. Let's see what else I got here. Still in the mode of, I'm trying to divide these into two different piles, and I realize now that I'm sticking the ones that I've showed in the piles with the ones I haven't showed. So hold on a minute. Yeah, I think I can figure it out. Don't know why I bought a couple of these. Very silly. Kids Halloween, scary stories and spooky songs. I'm not as much into the songs, but a couple silly stories. What the hell? These generally don't cost very much. I remember showing this and somebody went out and bought a copy of it. The Old Gray Goose. This is very much a tongue-in-cheek, this guy playing a character, sitting around the campfire telling original stories about Oscar the Light-Headed Pumpkin and the graveyard, and kind of like the silly side of Halloween stories. But I'm a sucker for all of these things. Okay, I got to start moving some stacks here because I can't even get to the CDs. I've got so many here. Okay, so now I can get to more. Here's some real favorites. I bought these, I can't believe it, for $1.99 each at a number of years ago in I want to say the mid-90s maybe, at one of those party, I think it was a store called the Party Box or Party City or one of those. And when you go in there Halloween, they have a lot of things unique to Halloween. But I found these audiobook horror stories on CD for $1.99 each in these little cardboard cases. Now, most of these stories, a couple years ago, I've actually posted up on my YouTube page. Some of them I think may be blocked now for copyright infringement. I'm not sure. Others remained. I've gotten so many things taken down now and blocked for copyright infringement that I can't recall if these ever got hit or not. I know they were up there for a number of years, and I haven't taken them down. So it's a whole bunch of these Blue Diamond Audio, which is a company that I don't think is in existence anymore, did a whole bunch of these. And they're, for just cardboard packages, they're really nicely packaged, especially for $1.99. And all of them run at least an hour, right up to 70-plus minutes. As you can see, Legend of Sleepy Hollow, The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. So a lot of classic stories read very professionally by people. Each one of these has two stories. Only one of them points out that it's actually for kids, and that's this particular one. With a couple, again, famous stories. The Bottle Imp is one of them, which is a Robert Louis Stevenson story. And the other one I can't quite read. But again, it's a 70-plus minute CD. This one isn't any more for kids than the other. It's serious actors, reading these stories. There's some classical music underpinning in some of it. Very professionally done. Not at all like a tongue-in-cheek kids thing at all. They're reading the stories straight, and these are all, real stories, from novels and things like that. I couldn't find enough of these, let me tell you. One called Horror Classics, The Great Story, The Monkey's Paw. That's a hell of a story. And The Damned Thing, which is a story by Ambrose Pierce. And again, all these are this company Blue Diamond Audio, which I don't know if they were just in existence for a few years, or whether I caught them at the end of their existence. These are such fantastic, fun things. Frightful Tales. This is a particular favorite of mine. The Night Wire, which is one of my favorite stories out of all of these. Another story by M.R. James called Rats, R-A-T-S. And these are just... there's nothing better to listen to than these are fairly long stories read straight from the novels. If you have a long drive that you're going on alone, especially if it's overnight, it's essentially like watching TV. These things are just so much fun. They're great fun at home, too. Here's another really good one. H.P. Lovecraft's story is the main one on here of the two. But again, all of these have some minimal music supporting them, but they're all done seriously. They're all read seriously by actors. Bram Stoker's Dracula's Guest, and another famous story by that French guy whose name I'm not going to try to pronounce again. Dracula's Guest is particularly interesting because it was written as part of the original Dracula novel by Bram Stoker, but the novel is so long as it is that the editors, the people that originally published the Dracula book, had him take out this chunk of the book because it was just so long. And I don't think it went published for many, many, many years. I was never aware of it when I was a kid, and I had the original Dracula novel. And eventually, they just published this whole Dracula's Guest as its own. It's a fairly short novel, but it's pretty long. I mean, you can see why it was cut from the original in terms of length. A very interesting story, written at the same time by the same author as the original Dracula, Bram Stoker. So another couple stories, another Edgar Allan Poe story, another Blue Diamond Audio. Man, I would give anything to work for a company like this that makes this kind of stuff. And here's the last one of the Blue Diamond Audio series. This is a good one. Midnight Shadows and the Ash Tree by M.R. James. Young Goodman Brown by Nathaniel Hawthorne. Another CD that's like 70 plus minutes. Really nice. Really fun stuff. And I tell you, God, even if these were $7 or $8, they would have been worth it. Forget about the $2 that I paid for each one. Okay, another serious, funny one. Around the Fire with Uncle Guts. Very much a tongue-in-cheek thing. So now we get into things that aren't necessarily specifically Halloween. And one of my favorite things to listen to amongst all this other stuff, I gotta move some of this stuff. One of my favorite other things to listen to is getting into music now. We did start off with music, but most of that was re-recordings of movie music. This is more straight music pieces. And I got a handful of classical things here. Some of these are obvious, and some are maybe not so obvious. You have to kind of know a lot about the history of how a lot of very famous classical pieces were used over the years, going way back, almost even to just outside of the silent era. As soon as sound started appearing in movies, like around 1931. A lot of the movie studios started, instead of coming up with just original music, started going to these old classical pieces that had slightly ominous tones to them, and vibes to them, and using them in horror movies or suspense movies or whatever you want to call them. And over the years, these themes are known kind of in two camps. They're just known by serious classical people as another composition by whoever the artist is, but for a lot of people, they've got that association, like for me, because most of these I heard initially as in movie themes. So I've got there's a few, this is like a string quartet, or like a string section from a classical orchestra, apparently, the Halloween Ensemble, and they do these little pieces, short pieces, mostly from movie themes. And then there's just a whole bunch of CDs that were marketed for Halloween, but they're really classical. Like, if you just put this CD on and you didn't tell somebody it was compiled by a company to be a Halloween CD, you would just hear these fairly well-known classical pieces, maybe with a slightly ominous tone to them, by various composers. But of course, the record companies are looking to make money any way they can, and so very smartly, because I bought them, they started packaging these things as, hey, let's put this out as a Halloween CD, and they took these famous classical themes that had been used in many movies over time and putting them together. So you've got Creepy Classics, a Halloween collection, and it's so hard for me to read these. Sorcerer's Apprentice is on here, I know. Something from Holst, The Planets. The Planets is one of those pieces, made up for these various different pieces in the planets made for each different planet, Mars, Venus, etc. And they pick a couple of the maybe more ominous ones to put on these collections, and that have been used as movie themes over the years. So Sorcerer's Apprentice, Night on Bald Mountain, I think, is on every single one of these CDs. Some Bartok is on here. Stuff like that. And I'm a sucker for all these. I'll buy these over and over again. Here's another one. Fright Night, classic Halloween music. And this one was this was actually, oddly enough, a Reader's Digest thing. And this was fairly modern because it's got, one of the themes on here is from a Harry Potter movie. I've never seen Harry Potter. And then again, the Sorcerer's Apprentice is on here. Toccata in D minor, that famous organ piece. Night on Bald Mountain is on here again. So a lot of themes like that. Now, a lot of these are repeated throughout all of these. Fright Night. This one was one that was out there for many, many years. Maybe it's because it's on CBS, so it's a big label. Same thing. Liszt, Mephisto Waltz is on here, and Charles Ives' Halloween, which is very original, very much fitting with the theme, but there's not a whole lot of these Halloween compilations of classical music that include those pieces. Ride of the Valkyries from Wagner, Holst Mars from The Planets again, March to the Scaffold from Berlitz, again, Bach Toccata in D minor, Sorcerer's Apprentice, Night on Bald Mountain, and Danse Macabre. Danse Macabre is one of my favorite pieces from that classical era. Here's another one called Witch's Brew, which is, to me, I love the cover so much that the price of the CD was worth the cover alone. This one is interesting. It's got a handful of original pieces written by a harp player, if I'm remembering correctly. And then a lot of the Grieg lyric suite, March of the Dwarfs is on here, Holst the Planets. This time they did Uranus, which is interesting, or Uranus, because that's not one that is usually chosen for these. The Grieg lyric suite, the Debussy piece, which I'm not sure that Debussy fits so much with Halloween. Mendelssohn, Midsummer Night's Dream. So there's some different pieces on here. Baba Yaga, which is a Russian witch, that the musical piece was based on this story of this Russian witch. Danse Macabre is on here again, favorite piece. Here's another one called Witch's Brew. It's got the same title. I love this one too. The New Symphony Orchestra of London and the Orchestra of the Royal Opera House in Covent Garden. I forget. These are older recordings, I seem to remember. There's a few pieces on here that I don't have on other discs. The Tam O'Shanter Overture, Mussorgsky, Pictures in an Exhibition. Parts of that is on here. Danse Macabre is on here again. Humperdinck, The Witch's Ride from Hansel and Gretel. Mephisto Waltz, Funeral March of the Marionettes. And I love that. I love that cover. Love it. And this one, which isn't marketed as a Halloween CD, but it's Mussorgsky's Pictures at an Exhibition. But also on here is Night on Bear Mountain. Now, Night on Bear Mountain is a big, big, big Halloween classical piece that's been in movies, and it's on most of those other Halloween compilations of classical music. So, to me, it's a Halloween CD. Plus, look at the cover. The cover certainly suggests it. But it's just mostly Mussorgsky's music. And again, it's got Pictures in an Exhibition and Night on Bear Mountain. And Night on Bear Mountain is definitely a Halloween-y piece. And Pictures in an Exhibition, which I never thought of necessarily as a Halloween thing until I really listened to it from that recording. It did dawn on me. Okay, yeah, that fits. And when I play all those, even though this has nothing to do with Halloween, I always get in the mood also to play this. Arnold Schoenberg is some pretty difficult music, kind of avant-garde. And this album definitely fits in. When I'm playing those classical CDs for Halloween stuff, man, oh man, does this fit. This is out there stuff. I love it. It's not the kind of classical music you play for people in the background, you know, that maybe don't appreciate Halloween classical music so much. But you're trying to turn them on to it. I would never put that on for that. And there's a couple things that are albums that I just associate with Halloween, and for no real good reason. But they, you know, when I pull those others out, these get pulled out and played as well. Ginestra or Ginestera, Popol Vuh, The Main Creation. This was new. Everything was new as of a few years ago. I only discovered this composer and this piece, and I really fell in love with it. And Anton Dvorak, and this, you know, there's nothing Halloweenish about the way they marketed this or sold it, but, and this is Symphony Number 8, which is the main part of the CD, but there's a 14-minute piece on here called The Noon Witch, which Dvorak wrote, and it's you know, because of the title, I ended up buying the CD, but also associating it with Halloween, and now I'm always playing it at Halloween. And the Noon Witch, which I knew nothing about, so I looked it up on the internet to see if that was just a random title, but it wasn't. It's an old, famous story, apparently, and Dvorak knew the story, or a poem, and was inspired to write a piece about it in 1896, apparently, and decided to write this symphonic poem called The Noon Witch, also known as The Noonday Witch. And it wasn't just a title that he slapped onto the piece, apparently. The story goes, and I'm reading from the internet, that a mother warned her son that if he doesn't behave, she'll summon the Noon Witch to take him away. He does not behave, and the witch arrives at the stroke of noon. The witch, described as a horrible creature, demands the child. The mother, terrified that the witch has actually come, grabs her son, and the witch begins chasing them. Finally, the mother faints, grabbing her child. Later that day, the father arrives home and finds his wife passed out with the dead body of their son in her arms. The mother had accidentally smothered their son while protecting him from the witch. The story ends with the father's lament over the terrible event. That's heavy, isn't it? And apparently Dvorak liked that story so much that he wrote the piece around it. And he actually uses different instruments in the orchestra to play the different characters. So apparently, according to this, the oboe and the bass clarinet are used to depict the misbehaving child and the witch. So I guess the oboe is the child, and the bass clarinet is the witch. And there's 12 strokes of a bell signal the coming of noon. And there's an interesting instrumentation because there's some tubular bell on here, you know, as well. So man, he took that whole story seriously. He didn't just like slap a title onto, I'll call it The Noon Witch based on that silly poem or something like that. He was very serious. Instruments representing the different characters. That's heavy shit, man. That's heavy stuff. So, moving on to more contemporary music. Some things I found myself listening to in recent years around Halloween time are, I have a box set of Popol Vuh, Florian Frick, and I didn't bring the box out, but there's a box set of Florian Frick's soundtracks to Werner Herzog movies, and a couple of them specifically, Cobra Verde, which I love, incredible soundtrack, and Aguirre. These are two incredible works, and for whatever reason, they always end up getting pulled out around Halloween. They've kind of got an ominous atmosphere to them. Another album that I know I've brought up before, Manuel Gottsching's, the guy known for being the Eshrai Temple guy, Dream and Desire. And there's nothing Halloweenish about the titles Dream, Desire, and Despair are the 3 titles on here. But as I mentioned last year, there's a 26-minute piece on here, and it's all synthesizers and electric guitar, played entirely by Manuel himself. One of my top 2 favorite albums by him. And there's a 26-minute piece that has this effect that I guess comes from a synthesizer. Throughout almost the entire 26-minute piece, there's this woo sound going through the piece in the background. And I guess it comes from a synthesizer. It's very effective. To me, it always sounded like a ghost flying around, out in the air, back and forth, in somebody's yard or something. And once I got that imagery in my head, it was a sure bet that this thing was going to get played every year a ton around Halloween. Speaking of Berlin musicians, for some reason, also Green Desert by Tangerine Dream. Now, it's funny because usually anything that specifically goes against the vibe of Halloween, the colder weather, autumn time and all that, anything that has a summer heat vibe to it is not, in my mind, going to get an association with Halloween. But a number of years ago, and this is probably 10, 15 years ago or more than that, it was right around Halloween, and I was listening to all my usual Halloween stuff, and I had bought Green Desert, which is an oddball album from Tangerine Dream, because some of it was recorded around 1973 and not released, and then around 85 or 86, Edgar Frussa went back in and recorded a whole bunch of additional stuff. We don't even know how much of the original 1973 recordings is still left on it, and recorded additional parts and then released it. So it's a kind of a mishmash of 1973 session, where we don't know how much music survived from there, and then this 1985-1986 period. Now, usually anything with heat-related, hot, summery weather would not be something that I would associate with Halloween, but it's 10, 15 years ago, whenever it was, I decided, I never really listened much to that album, so it was right around Halloween, maybe 2 weeks before Halloween, just like it is now as I'm filming this, and I pulled it off the shelf and gave it a listen one night, and I really dug it. It's probably not one of their better albums, but it's just got that mood to it. It's got a lot of Tangerine Dream music, especially from the 70s period, does have a darker vibe to it, electronic, creepy vibe at times. And this just fit in, and I ended up listening to it the next night and the next night and the next night. So what ended up happening this one year, I ended up listening to it once a day, every day leading right up to Halloween. And obviously that's a lot of listening to the same album. And, then put it back on the shelf, and I noticed the next year when the Halloween season started coming around again, and I started pulling all these other things off the shelf that I've shown, I got the desire to hear Green Desert again. So I put Green Desert on, and it became part of the listening thing. And the next year, same thing happened. So now every single year, even with this kind of hot summer imagery that Green Desert conjures up, even just by the title, there's even a track on here called Indian Summer. So it's very rare that I would ever associate things that suggest a season in a different season than what the thing is titled after. But man, oh man, this has become such a Halloween, album for me. They've done a lot over the years. Sometimes it's only the titles that make me think of Halloween, but just this year, I found myself listening to a couple more recent things. Something Edgar Frussa from Tangerine Dream did under the Tangerine Dream banner, under the name of the group, but they're entirely solo albums of his. None of the band members appear on them. And Edgar wrote this before he passed away a few years ago. Edgar wrote this little science fiction story, and he decided to make an instrumental album that was like a musical representation of that story. And he came out with 2 parts. And simply because I think, there's a little bit of creepy stuff on there, but I think simply because of that association with Halloween, with this little alien science fiction story, that I started thinking of this as a Halloween album. So Chandra Part 1, which I think originally came out in 2004, had this little, supposedly this, soundtrack, this little science fiction story that Edgar had come up with. And a number of years later, I don't think it came out till 2011 or so, came a Part 2, but you can see it's just a variation on the same cover. And again, it was like a further musical version of this, fictional story that he put up. But, listening to Tangerine Dream stuff, I always look, Green Desert gets a lot of plays this time of year. I did realize that there's a whole bunch quite a lot of Tangerine Dream CDs that could be Halloween music, at least for me. Some of them are very evident, simply because of the title. Sorcerer is one of them. This isn't a horror movie at all, oddly enough. I've seen the movie. It's like a jungle adventure movie. But the music is pretty dark, and honestly, it's not amongst my favorite Tangerine Dream stuff at all. But it's got a very ominous atmosphere, and it's one of their first soundtracks, one of their most successful, I think, musically soundtracks. Zeit, here's another one. Boy, this is dark. There's no rhythms on there. This could be Halloweenish. Originally a double record set, about 75 minutes of music. That's actually, for a long time, I definitely considered that my favorite Tangerine Dream album. Another personal favorite of mine. It seems to get played a lot with Green Desert, so because when I play Green Desert, I also want to hear this one. I'm starting to get a Halloween association with this particular Tangerine Dream album, Ricochet, which is from the mid-'70s. Another good one that I forgot to pull, Rubicon. Rubicon and Ricochet together are a really good pair, I think. And that's that is just a fantastic album cover photo. I believe this was, again, done by his late wife, Edgar's late wife, Monica. Just a fantastic album cover, and very good for expressing the music. I love that album, too. I have a really weird compilation here. Phaedra, from 1973, is one of the best-loved Tangerine Dream albums. I think it's overrated. I don't particularly love the album. I don't really like the album all that much, to be honest with you. The whole Phaedra piece I'm not crazy about. The shorter pieces on the second side I like better. But there's this interesting compilation just called Tangerine Dream that came out a number of years ago. I think this is the Disky label. I forget where they're from. The Netherlands, I think, are big for doing compilations, buying the rights to an artist's work and doing some oddball compilations at a very inexpensive price. And on that particular CD, they put the entire Phaedra album, the original studio album, which is kind of odd. I think they may have cut down the longest piece by about a minute because the timings don't quite match the original album. But I could be wrong. It may be all of the individual pieces from Phaedra are on there. But they also stuck, interestingly, half of the Rubicon album. Now, Rubicon is an album of 2 long pieces, each about 17 minutes long. And they put the entire first side, the entire part 1, 17 minutes and 16 seconds of the first part of Rubicon on here as well. And one track, a 10 and a half minute track from Stratosphere, which was the next album. So from the 3 albums in a row, they did Phaedra, Rubicon, and then Stratosphere. They have 1 piece each from Rubicon, literally half of the album, and 1 piece from Stratosphere, and then pretty much the entire Phaedra album. Weird. But you know what? Playing this together, just playing the whole CD and letting it run through, it's got a little bit of a Halloween vibe there. So, man, I did it again. For a guy with nothing to say, I can waste a lot of time. I don't know if this video is even going to come out. Whew, I hope it does, because I can't redo this. So I'll do a video explaining maybe where I've been and what I've been doing and stuff like that. Still looking for a job. But for this, let me just do this as my Halloween video for the year, and a long time missing video from the garage again. So I hope everybody's doing well. I hope you enjoyed this video, and maybe it puts you to sleep, which maybe is not necessarily a bad thing. And hopefully this will come out, and you'll see it, and I'll be back at some time in the future. Take care. Tune in next time for more
Tales from the Garage.